Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Argentina joined the Act. You probably know about these jokes that says that all the Nazis they escaped to Argentina. While there were some who actually did, it doesn't mean that all Argentinians they were in favor of the Nazis. Because, to be honest, Argentina in OTL was neutral for a long time. But Argentina they had a very strong bias against the British due to the Falkland Islands. Argentina had a sizable Italian and a smaller German population, and there was some sympathy for fascism as well. But after the Great Depression, Argentina never really came back to the same position where it was. Not only did that happen, but also there was a growing division amongst the population, and money was lacking pretty much everywhere. Foreign states could easily impose their own policies in Argentina, and in OTL, Britain, for instance, pushed several treaties with Argentina, but the governments which accepted these treaties they were never really popular to begin with. The military was very much Germanophile, but nobody was really that much of a supporter of Hitler or Mussolini. And, well, Mussolini, for instance, he was also never really considered like the big player of Europe, for instance. What happened was that the Argentinian army made pressures on the then president Roberto Maria Ortiz, but at the same time there was a growing pressure from the elites and power structures from Buenos Aires, who relied on British economic contacts and economic relations. Ortiz wasn't originally from Buenos Aires, and as a result both influences they equalized each other, and thus Ortiz had to stay neutral. But what if all of that changed? What if the Argentinian army could suddenly pressure Ortiz into joining the Axis? For starters, Argentina will not openly declare that they will just join the Axis. There is a whole process behind it. Ortiz would need to use a strategy. In OTL, prior to the Argentinian entry in World War II, there was a naval battle just a few kilometers on the sea. The Battle of River Plate could use a drama in Argentina, and the president who would have to give in into the pressure of the army would have to condemn the Brits. He could state that Argentina allowed the German ships to be there and that the Brits were not allowed to fight so close from the Argentinian coast. The British government would probably give a negative reply to it and not even apologize at all for it, obviously stating that they, the Germans, attacked them first. Ortiz, he would just try to ignore such an answer from Britain, and Argentina would now prepare the entry of war. A first act of Ortiz would be to discontinue selling beef and grain to Britain. This will not only give Britain problems, but also to Argentina a bit later on. There will be a lack of fundings, a lack of money, and Argentina would not even produce their own ammunition. This planned war against Britain will be seen as something independent from what Germany is doing in Europe. So it will be an Argentinian war and not just a mere assistance to Germany. The Falklands, or Malvinas, as the Argentinians call it, were, are and still will be a sour point in Argentinian-British relations. Despite all of that, nobody would really expect anything. But the British government, they would know that something would happen. But despite all of that, they would never really consider that there would be some type of invasion to their British territory. And by British territory, I'm speaking about the territories that are outside of Britain proper, like the Falkland Islands and so on. The British government, they would also not try to bother so much with Argentina, as they were also too busy in other fronts which they had to give a lot of priority, one of them of course being in Europe. Argentina's navy was ranked as the 8th most powerful navy in the world in the 1940s, and they could plan an operation on taking the Falklands, secure certain positions. The few ships and ports that Britain would have around what Argentina claimed to be Argentinian, and perhaps even up until the islands of Tristan da Cunha, could be sunk or attacked by the Argentinian navy. This means that important supplies from South Africa and the Indian Ocean will take a bit longer to arrive to the UK, or even not arrive at all. Guyana will most likely be safe, as well as the Caribbean islands. Ortiz tries to secure his position, but the military might get more powerful, and the elite of Buenos Aires could get more frustrated with the fact that Argentina would have no economic relations with the UK, and that the relations with the Axis powers were not really replacing the ones that they had with the UK. More contracts they would be done, and while Britain would have difficulties and while the US won't enter the war yet, Argentina would feel in the full sense of security. Plans would be made to take more islands, Guyana and even parts of the Caribbean. Argentina officially signs treaties with the Axis powers to export more of their beef and grain, and eventually they would become a member of the Axis. I think that Argentina could have a few advantages only for a little bit of time. Export to Japan could also be made, and these exports, they would probably be much safer for them to do than the ones going to Germany or Italy, for instance. But everything would change once the US would enter in the war. And the war will turn very badly for the Axis powers. The Allies easily gain back the control of the Atlantic, the Germans are beaten by the Soviets in several important battles, and the US, while having almost no navy at first, would build enough ships to pose a problem to Argentina. Argentina would probably miscalculate the situation and lose some ships, and after some time, some faraway ports as well, that would come back into the control of the Allies. They would have to quickly go back into the defensive. It is difficult to say whether Argentina would have a resistance movement or not, but if a resistance movement would arise, it would not be a left-wing or socialist one, but actually a fairly liberal one. Remember, the elite of Buenos Aires would be mad because the president and the army declared war on Britain. The trade between Argentina and the Axis powers would not be enough to replace Britain, and with the US now entering the war, well, that's even worse. They would lose a lot of money and many economic important activities as well. As a result, some of them would become dissidents and perhaps even form a resistance movement. Brazil might join the war earlier on, and even Chile could do some stuff, but Brazil would definitely do something, as they already did something in OTL. The advances in Italy would go slower because, first of all, the Brazilians, they would in this timeline not be able to help the Allies in there, and also Britain would have a few issues going on, such as a long period of famine, for instance, and also difficulties to get material. Argentina also would have less material here and there, and could hold out only in some positions, especially in the interior, but would be quickly dealt with due to the lack of military equipment. The population would quickly get angry at the government, and we might see something similar as in Italy, for instance. The president could just be ousted from office together with the military, and maybe also even a civil war could start with an invasion together at the same time. This would actually be a very good outcome for Argentina, because they would not face a situation like Germany did, where Germany, for instance, fought until the end. A few fights, of course, they will occur, and when Buenos Aires is circled by the Allies, the government might capitulate, or the liberal dissidents will violently take power and make peace with the Allies. Argentina will get punished, yes, but not as harshly as Germany, of course. Some areas in the Andes will be controlled by the UK and the US in a very indirect way, where they would get very favorable contracts, especially to extract certain minerals from the mines. And Brazil will also get some controls over the rivers, where they could build many more dams, but smaller border changes in those times they would be impossible in South America. Another important aspect is that, at least for Argentinian history, that Perón and as a result his wife Evita might not take power and be totally unknown in this timeline. I know this will be very popular, but I think that without him, and with the fact that the military will be calmed down, Argentina could become more prosperous and a little bit more stable. A military dictatorship wouldn't happen anymore, because that would be too taboo, and the Falkland Islands will become recognized as British. Only a few right-wing extremists, or even maybe left-wing extremists, they could recognize the Falklands only as Malvinas, but the government would officially recognize it as British. There won't be the Falkland Wars also as well. The Argentinians would also take advantage of the Marshall Plan and could reach standards similar to Italy, for instance, or perhaps even France. And that's where we leave it for now.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.